Today we're going to be working on lesson 3.1, representing relations. So here's our vocabulary words, so make sure you look over your vocabulary sheet as we start this new unit. We have a key idea, we have mapping, our domain goes to our range, so we have our domain values, and then we have our range values. We have a table which has the same domain and range values, just set up as X and Y. Then we graph out these values, and if we really wanted to, we can also make an equation from these values as well. We'll just be focusing on these three for today, the mapping, the table, and the graph, and we'll be talking about domain and range for today as well. So let's take a look at number one. It says representation of relations. So we're going to use these points, we're going to express them as a table, a graph, and a map, give the domain and range. So let's start off with the table. So I have some X values, and I have some Y values. Coming from this ordered pair, remember with an ordered pair, the first one is your X value, the second one is your Y value. This is for all ordered pairs. So let's start putting them out. So we have, I'm going to put them in order, -3 to -5, 0 goes to 4, 2 goes to 0, and 3 goes to -5. So I put them in order from least X value to greatest X value, but the Y values that are connected to those do not change. They still stay where they are. So now I want to plot these points. So the first one is at -3, 5. So we're going to put a point at -3, 5. Then we're also going to put a point at 0, 4. Then at 2, 0. And lastly at 3, -5. So we put our points for each of those. Now we want to create the map. So we have our domain. We have our range. Our domain values are -3, 0, 2, and 3. Our range values are -5, 4, and 0. So now we're going to map them. So -3 goes to -5, 0 goes to 4, 2 goes to 0, and 3 also goes to -5. Now what we're going to do is we're going to express them as a domain and as a range. So again, the domain, those are all your X values. So that's going to be -3, 0, 2, and 3. So I just took all my X values. My range is all my Y values. Do not repeat them. So if anything repeats, we don't need to write it down a second time. So -5, 4, and 0. So -5 repeats, so we just have to write it once. So now we want to analyze the graph. So we want to start off with identifying the independent and dependent and describe what is happening in this graph. So the independent variable in this graph is the one kind of setting the pace, and that is time. The dependent, that's the one that's connected to the independent. That's going to be number of text messages sent. So that's part A. Part B says describe what's happening in the graph. So as we move from left to right, we increase in time. The time goes up. So as time increases, the number of text messages increase. The horizontal line, so that would be right here and right here. Those two are the horizontal lines. Horizontal line means no text messages are sent. Okay. So as we go from left to right, this part right here, and this part right here, and this part right here are all of our texts that are being sent. And then these horizontal lines are the times when our text messages are not being sent. Number 3, so we're given all these values, and what we want to do is we want to come up with a scale that we can use for these values. So if we look at my x coordinates, just the x's, that's my 5, my negative 36, my 25, my 38, my negative 10, and my 1. The x is between, so the x coordinate, between negative 36 and positive 38. Y coordinate is between, so let's look at the y's. So the y is our 80, our 48, our negative 91, our positive 95, our negative 50, and our 22. So those are all of our y coordinates. So our smallest y coordinate is negative 91. Our biggest y coordinate is positive 95. So a good scale would be between, for our x is negative 40 to 40. For our y is going to be negative 100 to 100. And what should be our interval? Well, our interval should be for 5, for the x's, we're going to go by 5. For our y, we're going to go by 10. What does that mean? So for a 5, we'll have negative 40, negative 35, negative 30. And then for a y, we'll have negative 100, negative 90, negative 80 when we build our coordinate grid. So when we build our coordinate grid like that, we'll go with the scale. Each of the lines is equal to 5 for the x's and 10 for the y. They don't have to be the same. They can be different. Let's take a look at our last example. We want to interpret the scale and the origin for this. So they give us some information about social media. The average number of posts per day on a social media site each year is given in the table. Interpret the meaning of the axis, scale, and origin of the corresponding graph and data. So let's start off with the x and y axis. What is the meaning of those? So x is the number of years. So number of years since 2008. Y Well, that's the average number of posts. Let's take a look at our scale. So that's what basically we had here. This was our scale, how much we were going by. So our x scale, if we look at our graph, our x, we're going 0, 1, 2 by 1. Our y, we have 0, 50, 100. So our y scale is by 50. And then it's not just 50. If we look over here, it says average posts per day in the millions. So 50 million. Sometimes they'll put it in parentheses to let you know that it's not actually only 50 posts on the social media page. It's actually 50 million posts or 50,000 posts. You got to read the site over there to see what it's going to be. And then what is our origin? Mean. So that's, again, our origin is 0, 0. So the year is 2008. And then 0 posts per day. Because we start in 2008, because our x-axis is number of years since 2008. So the 0 on the x would be 2008. That's when we start at. And then for post, we haven't done any posts yet, so it'll be 0 post. Use these notes to help you answer the practice problems for this section.